one.
Hello and welcome to this session from QS Conference. This is Hamoud Al-Mahmoud, the Editor-in-Chief of Harvard Business Review Arabia, eager to be moderating this session. Whenever we discuss the future of work and future skills, we always find ourselves coming back to the roots and start discussing education. Whenever we start discussing business and the future of business and business models, we find ourselves keen on the education to keep up with the innovation and new successful case studies and management, etc. So we go back to education. Whenever we talk about a new technology and disruption, we hinge on education to help us figure out our reality and future scenarios. So we go back to discuss education all the time. And again, because whenever we discuss the education matter, we either have educators complaining about maybe policymakers or vice versa. So today we have both. So let's discuss education. We have educators, we have policymakers, we have ministers who have their two feet, one in the education and academia, and the other in policy making arena. And moreover, we have also an activist, a politician, an activist who can fill in any thoughts that are missing from both sides. Joining me today to discuss in this great panel, Professor Tony Chan, President of King Abdullah University, Saudi Arabia, KAUST, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, and Dr. Driss Ouaisha, Minister Delegate of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Morocco, Dr. Hakima Elhaité, former minister, former high-level champion for climate change for the UN, president of Liberal International. And also one of our guests going to join us through a video clip, Dr. Khalid Abdel Ghaffar, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Egypt. To start actually speak and discuss the education, we picked this title, which is A Decade Ahead, the digital transformation toward 2030 in the Middle East and North Africa. And to start actually tackling this interesting topic, let me start by asking this question about a decade ahead in this sector. First, I want all of our panelists to speak about their reflections on 1 year under pandemic, education-wise, what lessons learned from this experiment, and what are the signs that are being given from the education system. I will consider. Let's start our great panelists taking your opening remarks on this topic. So when we say, okay, let's discuss a decade ahead, 10 years in the future, from 2020 to 2030, regarding the education ecosystem here in the MENA region, considering what we have learned from the past year under pandemic, where one of, by the way, I love this quote from one of the QS reports, mentioned that we just compressed 10 years in 1 year. So we as jump 10 years in the future within only 1 year. Dr. Tony Chan, President of King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia. Let me take your opening remarks considering these facts.
Thank you very much, Hamoud. I would say it's almost a whole lifetime condensed into 1 year, because most of us have not encountered a pandemic, worldwide pandemic like this before. So in a way, you know, I think COUS has been an early adopter. I would say more about that. But I think the key point here is looking to the future. I think, you know, the pandemic has forced us into new territories that before, either because of conservatism or other reasons, university in general were hesitant to venture into. Okay, I mean, for example, online learning is not new because of the pandemic. And I'm not talking about just in the last 10 years. When I was a student, we were doing remote learning, for example, but it was never really heavily adopted for a reason. But now, you know, because of the pandemic, it's like learning to swim, you know. If you haven't done it before, you're hesitant, right? You don't want to jump in. But now everybody had to jump in. The ship is sinking, so you have to jump in the water. So we all found out, hey, we can tread water at least. We can swim. In fact, swimming is a good thing. I mean, in a way, that's the feeling we have. I mean, you know, being hesitant, as I said, is one thing. But I also sense in universities, because it's an old institution, there's also some resistance. And these two are different. Hesitant means you think about it, but you do it. And the hesitance or resistance for a good reason, because like all of us here, we're of a certain age. We all went to university, went to school under a certain environment. We enjoy meeting our friends physically, being inspired by teachers, you know, not just in a classroom setting. So we sort of treasure that experience. But now, you know, with the pandemic, by this forced experience, it sort of opens up new possibility. And this is massive. This is not just me personally experiencing this. It's everybody I know, everybody that's involved in the business are involved. So it has a huge momentum going forward. You know, why were university hesitant or resistant? Because we in the business would say, going to university is not just about going to class, right? It's not just about the lectures. It's about what goes on outside the lecture. You know, even at the undergraduate level, I think we learn more from our fellow student than from our professor. I think I was a professor, so it's fair for me to say that. So we, through this pandemic, we discovered that being forced online, you know, to do teaching is, in the beginning, is a huge disruption. It's not easy to do. But after it's going for a while, it actually is a great advantage. For example, we had students who were stuck elsewhere, you know, because of the pandemic, because of flights, but they were able to maintain their study. They were able to, all they need is an internet access, right? Some of our professors were also stuck, and they were able to deliver the lectures. In terms of laboratories, you know, we're a graduate research university, so laboratory is very important. That's a bit more of a challenge, okay? So you have to think about remote laboratories. It's not unheard of, okay? Think about astronomy. Most of astronomy is done remotely, for example, okay? So let me say a word about COUS, what we have done, just to give concrete evidence as what it means. So I remember in Saudi Arabia, all international flights were stopped on March 12th of 2020. So literally within 1 week, we had to convert all classes to online. And so we had to scramble. We had to, you know, take an iPhone, the professor, you know, take your lectures, or you do whatever you can. Students were elsewhere. They were saying, what do we do now? I cannot get back to campus. And so we were able to do that. We immediately hibernated our labs. The labs cannot be just switch off the electricity. You know, things are going, you know, there are live experiments and so on. Mentoring of students, we were able to do online. That's relatively simple, at least for a while. All of our business meetings, okay, like, you know, president, vice president, deans, we continue our meeting using Zoom, like today, okay? And in fact, for me personally, I would say for the last year, I would say over 80% of my business day is consumed by Zoom meeting. And I'm okay with it. I mean, it's not perfect, okay? It's not perfect. And then most importantly, we took the advantage of the pandemic and reoriented some of our research towards, dealing with the pandemic. Like we were able to develop our own PCR test, for example. That's one example. So so you can turn a crisis into an opportunity. And I think in the short term we did that, but I think the challenge for all of us is in the long term. I don't think we're going back. I think there's no way to go back to the pandemic.
I'll come back to you for further questions, maybe regarding these aspects. Dr. Idriss Awaisha, Minister Delegate of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Morocco, from your perspective, as you are in the office of being a policymaker, and at the same time you are an educator and an academic figure. So what did you learn from this past year? I mean, considering what Dr. Chan just mentioned, he said that we were like in a sinking ship, so we have to learn how to swim very quickly. Some people were very hesitant. Some people were like, savers for others. Some people early adapters. Tell me, I mean, you know the region. I mean, as a minister and as an academic figure, why we saw that variety of response. I mean, what did you learn? I mean, not for Morocco specifically, but for the MENA region. Dr. Awaisha, with us? So, Dr. Hakima, and until we have Dr. Awaisha back, let me ask you this question. As an environmental activist, as a politician, as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship activist. So let me have your reflection on this. You were always behind any movement or campaign trying to inject the ultimate goals of SDGs and etc. into the education system. Tell me what's your reflection on the 1 year under the pandemic education-wise?
First of all, thank you, Dr. Mahmoud, for moderating this panel on this topic, which is very important for the future of our children and for our world. And thank you, QS, for organizing this MAPL 2021 conference. In Liberal International, we believe that education is the beating heart of any nation. Education is the weapon to fight against populist manipulation, gender inequality, poverty, discrimination, the destroying of our planet, and any human rights violation. Education is our best way to create a society of knowledge and innovation to face the ever-increasing challenges the world is facing. Now, you are asking me if we have compressed 10 years in 1 year. I will say that maybe yes for some countries, but I will say that this pandemic has revealed alarming inequalities within and across countries that must be tackled urgently. Indeed, COVID-19 has also shown the hidden side of new age for education, digital education. And I think that you have invited Dr. Chan and our minister, and I think that our countries are good examples, but there are also bad examples and very hesitant countries and high schools. whom that were not able to follow this wave of
What are the bad signs you saw? I mean, you noticed.
Yeah, I will explain. I think that indeed COVID-19 pushed us to test systems that we expected to test few years or even decade from now. Physical access to education is not anymore the only way to learn. This is a fact now. For many young people, technology has brought education opportunities, as Dr. Shan said, where they did not exist before. But now, in some region of our, in some countries of our region, the digital infrastructure was not and is not available. You know, the reliable and internet is not universal and is not everywhere. Don't forget that in our region there is a Sorry.
Can we put Dr. Idris just for a minute, please? Continue. Go ahead, Dr. Hakima.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying that we will for sure shift to hybrid system after the pandemic. And in the MENA region, education will for sure have to change, but it won't be as simple as we think. It will require a political will, vision, and bigger financial effort from our government and educational institutions. Even though we have invested heavily in education and enrolled a large segment of the population in school, the return to education are still very modest. Many countries still lack the basic capacities and infrastructure needed to guarantee a qualitative education and to embrace the digital learning. And I will give you some example from Morocco, for example, and from the region I have visited during the pandemic. The impact of the online learning during the pandemic were not only positive one. Many educational institutions were not ready and have not only the time to develop the engineering of the e-programs, but also the pedagogy to deliver online teaching. For many families also, especially vulnerable families, and you know that in our region, families have many kids, online courses were a nightmare. Further, for many educators, parents, and beneficiaries, the online environment cannot replace the added value of in-person learning, especially when it comes to soft skills building. Despite these challenges, I completely agree with Dr. Shan. None of us can change anything about what is happening right now in the world. Technology is rapidly changing the world around us, and we cannot ignore this change in educational patterns if we want to pave the way for innovative, progressive schools in line with the global transformation the world is witnessing now. The worries about digital education, I think, are legitimate. Personally, I don't think the conventional education will never disappear, but it will just take up different forms. We should embrace Sorry?
We'll discuss these aspects in another question, Dr. Hakima. Thank you for these opening remarks from your side. Dr. Awaisha, Minister Delegate of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Morocco, as Dr. Hakima mentioned that this year, a year under the pandemic, just exposed how vulnerable and maybe bad some of our education system infrastructure here in the region. Tell me, from your perspective, what did you learn from this? We saw countries went to this full online education very smoothly, and some other countries were really, I mean, some of them just stopped educating for a long time because they couldn't enter this era. So tell me, from your perspective, what did you learn? I mean, taking this 1 year as as a starting point for a decade ahead.
Thank you, Si Mahmoud, and I apologize. I was disconnected for a while, so I may be repeating some of what either Professor Chan or Minister Elhaité may have said. The year indeed allowed us to make a qualitative jump in terms of online education, and to confirm what was already said, in 3 months, from the time we closed down schools to the end of spring, from the 15th of March to the 20th, 22nd of June, we accumulated at the university level over 120,000 academic content available for students. 120,000. We had been doing online education, but very timidly, and particularly in science and engineering and medical schools, but not much in humanities, law schools and science schools, where between 80 and 90% of our university students go. And so the jump was qualitative, and the important thing, I think, more importantly, is not the quantity, but faculty overcame their conservatism, as was mentioned, overcame the fear to cross the threshold into the technology use, and they adhered in large numbers to producing academic content online. On the other hand, the experience did show vulnerabilities that we have in the system. And I'll mention only two that we are dealing with. The first is connectivity that's not always available. And sometimes even when it's available, it's not the speed that the learners and the teachers want. And so something has to be done, and I'll come back to what we're doing about it. And the second is equipment. And I think Ms. Elhaité said that we have a family with multi-kid family that may have 1 or 2 computers, so they have to take turns. And in response to this, I think the crucial thing now is the enthusiasm, the productivity, the qualitative change that we've seen. How do we sustain it? And so the question of sustainability, of the motivation, of the desire, the productivity, we have, and we're in the process of getting an agreement with the national regulator of telecommunications and with the 3 major companies to ensure that all of our public universities are connected all the time, and students have access to knowledge available and to academic content from within as well as from outside campuses. And the financing has been secured for that, something between around $15 to $18 million by Universal Fund that large or major telecom companies contribute to the general good and to spreading of technology. We still have the issue of making sure that all students have a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone. We are in the process of getting all mobilized, but within the logic of a hybrid education for the future. This is not going to replace the faculty, and the faculty, some of them have been destabilized, and we had to reassure them that this is complementary distribution between online and face-to-face education. And we're working, and the objectives for us are for each university to produce a major fully online, 1 major. So focusing the efforts on a major where we have the stars, low-hanging fruit, and then begin with that, and the extent is learned from the experience and generalizing it from each university. Once we have that, we can move to an online university, a national online university that would represent the best in each university in terms of online education. So yes, we've learned a lot. It was a qualitative jump, but we've discovered also challenges for the future, and we're working on overcoming those challenges so that we can maintain the momentum and maintain further introduction of technology in the teaching operation, knowing that the future is a hybrid future.
Great. So, thank you, Dr. Aisha. Dr. Chan, if we want to speak about 10 years ahead, we should start by asking a question about the short term. I mean, what's next in a short term after the pandemic? So everybody now using the expression of the hybrid. When we talk about the future of work, there's now a term called hybrid workplaces and hybrid work, and there are a lot of articles about this. What about the hybrid? If you agree the future post-pandemic is going to be hybrid, so tell us how this hybrid education going to look like in short term.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball for the future, but I can tell you that we've been discussing this issue actually on a weekly basis. I'm with my senior leadership, so I can tell you some of the issues we're looking at. So one is hybrid, as I mentioned before, in terms of teaching, is I think, a very definite thing. Okay, there will be a mixture because we have seen the advantages, and at least where we are, we do have the infrastructure. I sympathize a lot with places in the world where you don't have access to the internet on a regular basis, but we do have that. So that's, to me, the only question is how to do that in the best way possible. For example, you don't want to just continue with a lecture series, you just put that online. You might have to consider, a flipped classroom where you go to the meet physically for discussion, for brainstorming, and you do your lecture online, for example. That's just one example. The other thing we're looking at is how to make our laboratories a little bit more remotely accessible. And one is using robots, autonomous system, but the other one is also a human system where you have backups. You don't need 100% of the people in the same lab all the time. You may have some system where you can do that. So that's another possibility. We are thinking about remote working. Now, you can look at remote working. Right now, it's sort of forced on us, right? People are stuck and they have a family emergency. But imagine after the pandemic. Flexible working has been adopted by many companies and organizations around the world before the pandemic. And it's good for work-life balance. And there are many other benefits. So at a university setting, we are debating among ourselves whether we can do a little bit of that. You can say a certain small percentage of time where people can choose what they do. Right now, I think we 5 or 6 online are in 5 different countries. Okay, more or less the same time zone. So it can be done, but not 100%. I think that's what we're gonna have to do. Beyond that is another matter. Okay, so in the short term, I see a continuation of hybrid. I see a little bit of trend to try to organize our intrinsically physical activities like laboratories, but also the general workforce is to allow more flexibility to increase productivity and increase work-life balance.
Great. Give us some practical examples from KAUST. What are you planning to do for the next 2-3 years? I mean, are you reviewing your system regarding how much people should attend the camps, how much or what kind of research and how they are going to do their research, their exams? I mean, are you reviewing these
Yes.
stuff to make it fit for the hybrid era?
Don't forget, we're still in the middle of the pandemic, so there's no decision. But let's say
leaders like you should start.
No, but what I'm saying is an ongoing discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can give you an example. Okay. So can we have students, international? We have, 2/3 of our students are international. They are not from Saudi Arabia. Can we have students who are not in residence on campus? Because, during the pandemic, many of them are not. Okay. I would say no, but a good part of it can be. I cannot imagine you get a degree without being here, getting to know the professor physically. Can you have professors that are not in residence on our campus, for example, right? You can imagine in the MENA region, especially, you know, if you talk about research and education, it's a global business, and the pool of talent is global, and many of them are not as familiar with the MENA region as we would like. So if you open that up, you open up your pool of talent dramatically. But you know, I don't think we can go that far. Okay, imagine we have, let's say, one half of our professors are not living in Saudi Arabia or on our campus. So that may be, but can you allow certain fraction of? Can you allow some flexibility? For example, for our general workforce, can we allow, on the average, let's say 1 day a week, you can work remotely, which is actually, we were doing it much more than that during the pandemic. But we have to demonstrate, we gotta have the policy, the associated policy to go with it. So because we have many stakeholders, you don't want the perception to say, okay, people are just taking a day of holidays, right? So you want to say they're actually even more productive, work life and so on. So these are the issues that we are considering. But remember, we are not like an internet company like Twitter, where they allow everybody to go work remote. They don't even, they can go to a cheaper place to live. We are a community. I think that's what defines a university. So I don't think we can go all the way.
Great. So, Dr. Waisha, I will ask you as a Minister Delegate of Higher Education. Dr. Hakima, please prepare your ideas. I need you to attack both interventions, because you are the referee here, you are the activist. So, Dr. Waisha, if you have, I mean, what's your perspective on the hybrid education, the hybrid short-term projections for the hybrid education? How do you see it? I mean, do you agree with what Dr. Chan mentioned, or you have a crystal clear idea you can implement in Morocco at least?
In Morocco, in public universities, we have a fairly large degree of autonomy for the universities, and within the universities, a fairly large autonomy for the professor, for the faculty member. So I think our approach is, the question to be decided in hybrid education is the dosage. What dose of face-to-face education, and what dose is for remote learning? I think that's crucial, but it would be left to the best judgment of the faculty once we all discuss and agree on the principle with the university presidents, and they go and do it with their own deans and faculty. I think there are two types of impact that we need to accompany faculty and schools as they move forward. One is in terms of teaching with the online component, where we're moving from essentially transmission of knowledge from the professor to the student to providing an environment for the student to learn themselves, to acquire, because they will be learning on their own. They will be doing e-learning, and in the meantime, they will be discovering other things. So in this, we're focusing more on the learner, so as to arm them with skills that they can use to acquire knowledge themselves. And so we enforce and we enhance the teaching, the learning, and the acquisition of skills in addition to the acquisition of knowledge. The other impact is in terms of testing, because from the traditional perspective, remote teaching does not give us the integrity of the tests that we look for. And so we need to change our mode of testing and our perception of testing. It's not a question of reproducing or giving back the knowledge that was transmitted initially by the faculty. It's of demonstrating that we have internalized the concepts and the knowledge, and that we can use it in different situations, in different contexts. Hence, again, the skills are extremely important, and the space allowed the student to demonstrate that they've acquired those skills. So I think in both teaching and evaluation, there is a a paradigm shift that needs to function, to take place. And in teaching, for the time being, and in our traditional teaching, the central element is the professor, is the faculty. We need to move with online education, even with the hybrid part. We need to move to the student, to the learner becoming the center. So from teacher-centered to learner-centered approach, it will take time, do it gradually, but we need to be moving in the right direction. And in evaluation, we need to focus on performance, on skill acquisition, on ability to perform in various situations and respond to remote assignments.
So in a practical term, Dr. Owaisha, now speaking about experimentation, which is one of the headlines of these times of the pandemic, do you think, I mean, are you or other universities in the region or education policymakers are experimenting or testing new methods of exams, of attendance for students? Because it seems many, they still tackling this 10 years of the future in the matter of online education in the same, stone ages of, methods how to exam people. I mean, they need to just monitor people through cameras and to see their eyes if they are shifting through the exams right and left. If your sister maybe opened you Google or something. I mean, are you, or do you think it should be done very fastly to experiment in new methods that are aligned with this online era?
Yeah, I think we're taking the lead and building on successful experiences. When, after the pandemic, we asked universities to evaluate the learning of students and the faculty were reluctant to evaluate remotely, and they started in Casablanca, and in the middle of exams, Casablanca was locked down. And so they had no choice but to examine remotely. And so they developed, and we discussed, they developed exams simultaneously. They moved to multiple choice questions rather than essay writing. But they also moved, when the numbers allowed for it, to projects. And they moved to orals, examining the project, asking questions through Skype, through different technologies. So there is the mood and the wave of change is taking place. And I think that's what we want. Right. We set the wave going, and it's to the faculty to discover what the best approach that they feel comfortable with, as long as I think it's forcing us to also approach teaching and learning by outcome. What are we seeking? And as long as those outcomes are achieved, so we need to find a way for students to demonstrate that those outcomes have been achieved.
This is very bold. Dr. Hakima, let me ask you this question. This time, I don't know if you have any comment on
yes,
what
please. Yes, I want to share together with you a project we are developing with the Liberal International, and that project was launched well before the pandemic. I had an agreement with the mobile industry. You know that mobile are covering more than 5 billion people around the world, more than 5 billion. Imagine how this tool can give access to education if we develop an application to democratize education worldwide. So we were thinking to use mobile industry and the smartphone. This is the generation of smartphone, and both Dr. Chang and the minister are speaking about. So how to use this technology to allow any young people anywhere in the world to reach and to have calls with the best professors and in the best university. Imagine with me what will be the impact on migration, what will be the impact on the financial benefits of the families, what will be the impact of the quality of education they can receive, and what will be the impact on access to equal opportunities worldwide. So we were developing this project well before the pandemic, and I'm very happy that this unfortunate and devastating pandemic gave us the opportunity and gave to our universities and inventors and thinkers the opportunity to work on such a project. I was listening to Dr. Chan, and I'm asking myself why someone who is in South Africa cannot follow the course of your famous university or the university of the Moroccan university when we have the best teachers. So I think that we have now we are at the crossroad of improving the quality of education, high education. I'm thinking about high education because I think personally that it's more complicated to be implemented in lower levels. But in high education, we can give opportunities to all youths to have the chance to receive the best quality if our universities organize themselves to do so.
Great. So, Dr. Chan, what Dr. Hakima mentioned is somehow part of what's so-called edutech. So, using technology to democratize best practices in education. So, how do you see the edutech, education technology, affecting the current ecosystem of education here in the region and the disruption that might happen in the near future for the education ecosystem?
Well, edutech has already impacted most of the world. I mean, just look at we're on Zoom.
Yeah.
I think Zoom 1 year ago is a very different company. You know, right now, I don't know, it has like 500 million people using it every day. So, but I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned before, I think all the online system, not just Zoom, Team, WebEx, and so on, they have not been able to completely replace the human experience of interacting with people. But, it has a lot of room to go. For example, right now, all the professional conferences, like, we all in academia, we go to professional conferences. Well, they were forced to stop. So they hold these conferences virtually, okay? And they make it so that it's like you are there. So you go, there's a lobby, there's a coffee shop, you have a room that you can go into, you bump into people and so on and so forth, for example. To give you another example, in Saudi Arabia, there's been a very well-known sort of Davos in the desert. It's called Future Investment Initiative. And I happen to be on this board, so I know. So this last one, the meeting was held maybe in January, 2 months ago. So it was hybrid physical and virtual. So it had 5 sites, physical sites. Riyadh was one, and then London, New York, Mumbai, and Beijing, I think. So you are in the region, you can physically go to that site, but they are connected virtually. And it has over 1 million people who participate in one way or another. So that's the new future.
Yeah,
I think we're just scratching the surface.
Augmented reality, maybe augmented reality.
Yeah. Well, it's not even that far yet. You can put on a goggle. But I think that's a huge thing for the tech industry to go into. That's just one area of basically duplicating the human experience online. But there are many things I mentioned about remote labs. Imagine you can do all your labs remotely.
Dr. Chan, speaking about this, knowing this, do you ask yourself sometimes how my university should be prepared from now to be irreplaceable and disruptible?
I don't think I worry about that. I think we were created with a unique mission. I don't think that has gone away. I see this as an opportunity, okay? Because when you have disruption like this, then everybody else is more or less on the same starting line. The playing field is more level. You know, we have university that's like 1,000 years old. We are only like just over 10 years old. So we cannot compete in the conventional world. But if you are in this brave new world, if we do a good job, we have a better chance to be known, to compete. I think so. We want us to be in a leadership role. So we are doing a lot of stuff. For example, online teaching. It's something that we want to do because we want to improve our education for our students. But we also wanted to expand the footprint of the university. Right now, when we give a seminar, when we give a course, we announce it to the whole world. The whole world. Okay.
Great.
So big difference.
So let me ask you, Dr. Owaisha, this part of this question. I mean, as a minister and also as an academic figure, you know this very well. When we discuss this digital transformation in the education system and educational institutions want to be prepared for this near coming future and disruption, they need to be very resilient. They need to be agile in changing curriculum, changing methods, ways to exam, attendance to the campus. But they find themselves tied up because regulations from Minister of Education not allowing them to do so. So tell me, how are you tackling this in Morocco? And as a minister, how do you see this in a regional perspective?
I think at the Ministry of Higher Education, the pandemic has had a big impact when we have also moved our focus from policy per se and respect of policy to result and outcome. And so with the universities, we're encouraging them to take initiative. We're even encouraging them to give us project to finance as long as they go along those ways. They have new ideas, they have new approaches, particularly in including technology in the digital transformation. Obviously, in the digital transformation here, technology is extremely important because it's driven by the recipient, by the learner. The learners are digital kids and they come equipped, and it makes all the sense in the world for us to build on what they bring with them so as to achieve higher goals and more important goals in learning. But there is a very important component in there. It's the academic content. And so we need to develop appropriate academic content that's also, as you said, adapted to the requirements of today and adapted to the needs of tomorrow. And that thinking needs to go along with the technology. Academic content, some of it, all it needs is conversion, not creation. Intro courses for first-year university students are essentially conversion to digital format. And in order to do that, we need to invest in technology, technicians who accompany the faculty. And so technology, academic content, and the professors who lead the show.
Great, but we need to consider, as you said, changing the curriculum sometimes takes 10 years in some countries because of the bureaucracy. So, Dr. Hakima, the era we are in now, named or titled by the World Economic Forum as the Great Reset, as the time to do the Great Reset for everything. So doing a great reset in education, it's a chance for activists and politicians like you to inject the ideas, the thoughts, or the causes you believe in. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and one of them, quality education, is very important. how are you planning to try to seize this opportunity and to try to inject those SDGs to be in the curriculums? Because now every university or every education institution is preparing for the post-pandemic. So it's your chance. Are you going to seize it? How?
Yeah, we are already working with our member parties. You know that HDGs are cross-sectorial and it concerns all the domains and activities, not only education. So if we want really to implement and to insert HDGs within our policies, it will concern all the policies. And either the SDGs or the climate change, the Paris Agreement are transformational. So if we want to implement them, it should begin not only in universities, but it should begin at school. The first step of the learning, it should begin at school and continue in each level until the university. So what we are doing with our member parties, we are working together to look at the policies they have. We are exchanging policies from the best practices to be able to reach this global transformation, which is called by the SDGs and by the Paris Agreement. You know, we are speaking about changing everything. This is a shift in our consumption choices, in our way of building, in our transportation mode, in our infrastructure, constructions, etc., etc. So this is a change of a mindset, a change of culture, and I will say even change of civilization. And it will need that we change the mindset of the very small kids, and we create a generation of inventors and innovators. It's why what our minister and Dr. Shan were saying is very important. We need to excite the creativity of our students to be creative and to create and to innovate, to allow us to face the challenges humanity is facing. And you know that climate change and the implementation of SDGs are vital for the quality of education, but for all the other goals, because each goal of the SDGs is linked to education.
Thank you, Dr. Hakima. So at the end of this discussion, which went very fast, actually, still some questions when we want to plan for 10 years ahead about how are we going to shape our educational institutions to be prepared for the future skills, for the lifelong learning, for the disruption coming from the edutech. It's just a kickstart. We started today. Thank you to my great panelists, Dr. Tony Chan, President King Abdullah University of Science and Technology from Saudi Arabia, Professor Idris Awaisha, Minister Delegate of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Morocco, and Dr. Hakima Elhaité, former minister, former high-level champion for climate change for the UN, and she's president of Liberal International. Thank you so much, and thank you, our audience, for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is the SDG pin.
Great.
Thank you so much. Minister, greeting.